In it comes. There goes the shot on goal. It's in. It's in. Jamie Dwyer.
Heavy lifting. Goes up to Graham. Takes the lead. Looks a winner. Draws away from
The Australians have just broken the American stranglehold on this race.
Lauren Mitchell, thank you for joining me.
That's all right. That sounds very impressive when you say it all back to back.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you. How does that CV sit with you?
It sounds pretty good, actually. Yeah, especially like, you have an 18-year career and most people don't even get half of those. So, yeah, I'm very impressed with myself.
Does an Olympic year give you a bit of a buzz, like perhaps a bit of nostalgia as well?
Yeah, it does a little bit. I keep forgetting that it's Olympic year because it seems like we've just had the Olympics. Obviously, with COVID and stuff, it was postponed a little bit. But now, like, it seems the hype's slowly starting to get there again, which is very exciting.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. Well, I suppose we'll start at the start, but, the overall discussion, when did the Olympic dream begin for you?
When I first started training, so I was 6 when I first started training.
Yep.
Obviously didn't think I was ever going to go to the Olympics then. And I was always one of those people or a gymnast, I guess, that wasn't as good as everybody else. So I was one of those ones that kind of sat in the background and persevered. And it wasn't until I got to maybe like a nationals level and started traveling interstate and started competing, I was like, oh, okay, like this is exciting type thing.
Yeah.
And then when I made my first World Championships team, I was like, oh, maybe I'm actually good at this sport.
Yeah.
And that was 2007, just before the 2008 Olympics. I was like, maybe I can actually trial for the Olympics. And so it wasn't really until then that I actually believed that I could go.
That is amazing. Look, let's go back. So 1991, you're the firstborn to your parents, Leanne and Graham, and you'd become a family which, when your youngest brother, Travis, was born in 1997, would be a family of 6.
Yeah.
What are your memories growing up?
It was very loud in our household, being one of 4 or one of 6, I guess. Yeah, it's very loud. We've got European heritage, so everyone kind of talks on top of each other. Everyone wants to be heard. But we're also like a very active family as well, like always outside, always playing. Yeah.
Competitive with your siblings?
Yeah. I think probably my sister's the only one not competitive.
Yeah, right.
Where me and my youngest brother were very competitive because he also did gymnastics for a little bit as well.
Yeah.
And then my older brother, like the third one, my older brother when I say that, he's competitive, but he's better at not showing it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So family board game night would have been a bit chaotic?
Yes. If I didn't win, it didn't happen.
How did you find your way to gymnastics? You mentioned you were 6. How did that happen?
Yeah, I had a double-decker gymbus party.
Oh, I love those.
Yeah.
Yes.
So for everyone who doesn't know, it's a double-decker bus. They take out all the seats and they put in gymnastics equipment.
Yep.
So I had that for my 6-year-old birthday party. And basically that sparked a spark, So I kept pestering Mum, and I was like, take me down, let me try. And eventually, I think it took about 6 months because my birthday's in July and she waited till the January and went, okay, we'll take you down. We'll give it a try.
Yeah.
And then I tried, loved it. And then a waist talent scout came, I think saw me train one session. Then they invited me to join the waist flyers and that was it.
It's funny you say that because off the top there, you said you weren't the most talented. You didn't think you were any good, but is that just like the little demon on your shoulder saying, no, you're not good? Because it sounds like you were.
I think compared to like the club level gymnasts,
Yeah.
I stood out from there. But when you get to that elite pathway, so when you're in the waist flyers, I was definitely average. And there were definitely people that I trained with that got skills way quicker than me and they were so much more naturally talented. Like, yes, I am good at gymnastics and I have a certain bit of natural ability, which I think you have to be successful. But skills came to me quite hard. So I had to train to actually get the right motor patterns to be able to perform and execute those skills.
Yeah, right.
Where other people just went, oh, I want to try this skill, and then they had it the next day. Where for me, it would take me months and months.
Yeah.
So
what sort of kid were you? What would Lauren's teachers say about Lauren?
Probably that I was pretty quiet.
Okay.
Yeah, just sat back, did my work. I'm a very logical person.
Yep.
So, and very like time orientated and time conscious. I think I had to be growing up because everything was all like nice and scheduled and, training in the morning, then school, then training in the afternoon, and then you had to do your homework after that.
Yeah.
So I think because of that, I was quite quiet, but then also quite confident as well.
Yeah. Okay. So you found yourself into this Waist Flyers program. This is just a junior talent identification pathway. Is that what the Waist Flyers are?
Yeah, basically. So it stemmed from having like a waist scholarship type thing. And for sports, probably nearly any other sport, say for example athletics or whatever, you can train at a local club, and then once you get to a certain level, and then you're good enough, then you can apply for a waist scholarship.
Yeah.
Gymnastics is a little bit different because you have to be training at that elite level from such a young age. And there wasn't really anywhere to do that. And so they created this Waist Flyers program to kind of forge this elite talent at a young age and give those girls those opportunities to then be able to be invited into Waist and get that scholarship.
Yeah, okay. And then I want to ask you about the full Waist scholarship because, for most, they identify it or they apply. Yep. It's a great moment. But I think little Lauren went about this a slightly different way, didn't she?
I was having a bad day. So the girls I was training with, they were just refusing to do things because they were obviously having a bad day as well. And then I was there. I was, again, like I was saying, persevering, busting my guts out, trying to get all these new skills.
Sorry, how old were you at this point?
Probably about 12 or 13.
Yeah, good, yep.
Fiery as well, I think my teachers would say about
Fiery,
me.
This is what I wanted to hear. So you're having a bad day. You're 12 or 13.
Yeah.
The girls are also having a bad day.
Yeah.
They're spat the dummy.
Yep. I turn around to my coach and I go, they have a waist scholarship. I don't have a waist scholarship. I feel like I deserve a waist scholarship at this point. And this was our morning training session, went to school. Then that afternoon, my coach goes, okay, we've got your waist scholarship now.
By the afternoon?
Yeah, by the afternoon. So I was very lucky.
Ask and you shall receive.
I don't do that very often. I felt quite guilty afterwards, but hey, I got my scholarship.
Yeah, well, look where it got you.
Yeah.
A young girl then, so as a young girl, you enter an elite training program. How was that?
For me, it didn't really feel much different.
Yeah.
Because the Waist Flyers program was basically a transition into the Waist program.
Yeah.
So nothing really changed. The change, I guess, was when you went from the different group stages. So you start off in group 7, which is like the babies. Then you end up in group 1 and group 2, and they're a combined group. And that's when you start traveling interstate and internationally.
Yeah. So they're our elite gymnasts in the state.
Yeah. And it's based on your level, basically. So in gymnastics, you have different levels. My day, it may have changed now. You started with like a pre-stage 1. Oh, it has actually, it has changed now. But when I started, it was a pre-stage 1. It went all the way up to stage 4 and then junior national, junior international, senior international.
Yep.
So it was based on where you were in those levels on which group you went into.
Yeah, right. So talk us through a training schedule. I know that the Waist Flyers, when you're in primary school, it's somewhat, from my perspective, tolerable.
Yeah.
However, when year 8 hits, what is a training schedule in the life of a waist gymnast?
So when you're in high school, you do 10 training sessions a week. So we started at 6:45 until 9:45 in the morning.
Gross.
Then went to school and then left school a little bit earlier and started at 3:30 till 7 p.m. And that was Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Wednesdays we trained 9:45 till 10:30 in the morning and had Wednesday afternoon off.
Oh, great.
Yay.
Yay.
And then Saturday was 8 till 12. And Saturday was usually, if we're in like that competition phase, that's when we did like a practice competition. And Sundays we had off.
Oh,
yeah.
Great. So we get a day off. Wonderful.
Yeah.
No, look, I joke, but did it feel like a lot? Like
back then, no, because it wasn't like, okay, you're training 10 sessions a week. When you first start, you train 2 sessions a week, then you slowly progress to 5 sessions, and it is a slow transition, so you don't realize until you're there. And then every now and then they would give us a Thursday morning off, and that was really good because that was more than 24 hours off from the Wednesday morning to the Thursday afternoon.
That's good.
Yeah. But you have to remember gymnastics training, it's not, say, like football training when you're running around nonstop for a couple of hours. Gymnastics, even though we train for the 3 or 3.5 hours, it's all apparatus time. So our longest routine is only 1:30.
Yeah.
So you're only doing short, sharp skills, and then you rest for 5 minutes, and then you go again.
Yeah.
So it's not constant moving for the 3.5 hours.
There, yeah, absolutely. There is still that, commitment of being there constantly in that place. Did it?
Yeah.
Did you ever dread going to training?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
But I more loved it than anything else. Like, and it is hard, like, especially that elite athlete mentality.
Yeah.
You know, I watch the football and stuff now on the TV, and you can see their dedication, their commitment, and what they put their bodies through. And I look back at what I did and I'm like, oh, like I used to do that too, you know, and it gives you just a new appreciation of it. But when you're in that mentality and that mindset, that's what you want. And you want to do everything humanly possible to be successful. And that's what you have to do.
Yeah. Wow. That is an insight into the mentality. Getting to and from training, right? So this is what I'm fascinated to hear about. You told me that you were from a family of 6, well, 3 siblings, so 4 kids in total. You know, first, what did your mum do? What did she do for work?
So she was a dental nurse.
Yep.
So she did that for a little bit. She worked in a cafe for a bit. Then she was an orthodontic administration and a beautician by trade as well.
Yep.
So she bounced around jobs a little bit, basically to fit in with our lives, to work during the school hours so she could do the school pick up and drop off. But obviously then I'm training. So she has to get us all up at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, get me ready, drop me off at training, come back, get the other guys ready for school, take them to school, pick me up from training, take me to school, then go to work, and then basically do the reverse in the afternoon.
My God.
And you don't appreciate what she did until you start driving yourself,
Yeah.
or now that you're an adult and you start coordinating your own life and you're like, I have no idea how she did it.
That's insane. Like, how do you reflect on what she did for you?
Oh, I'm like eternally grateful, you know. And I know that sounds so cliche, but I wouldn't have been as successful without her, you know. And I used to get annoyed at her if she didn't bring me dinner at 7 p.m.
Yeah.
I'm like, how could you forget about me and not bring me dinner? How are you 5 minutes late? And it's 7:05, you know.
Yeah.
But that's because she was busy doing something else. And when you're a kid, you just don't realize, right? You're so selfish and self-absorbed about what you need, forgetting about everybody else. But I think being a family of 4, she tried to keep it quite even. So like my brother did baseball for a little bit. So she dragged us along to all his games. My sister did horse riding, dragged us along to all her competitions. So she kept it quite even, which was good because everyone had to come watch me.
A bit of me time.
Yeah.
Isn't it insane, you know, the sacrifices that parents can make?
Yeah.
Which just sounds incredible what your mum's done there.
Yeah.
Tell me about your dad. So I understand he worked, obviously he worked a fair bit as well and worked away.
Yeah, so he was in China for 7 years while we were growing up. So I think I was about 10 when he moved over.
Right.
So mum basically did it all by herself because he was over there trying to make a living over there and support. And they were still together.
Yeah.
And he ended up coming back maybe when I was about 17, 18.
Yep.
And then they tried to make it work and then they're not together anymore. But yeah, it was quite challenging because you don't really have a relationship with your dad, but not really because it's only, and this was before FaceTime and everything, right?
Yeah.
So it was literally on the phone. We had to buy phone calling cards and top them up because they were international calling cards because otherwise it's too expensive to call over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's your relationship like with, so you mentioned your parents split. What's your relationship with them current day?
Super close to mum still.
Yeah.
I think, you know, you always are with your mum.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dad's still a bit touch and go, but I think that's a male mentality as well. And this will sound bad, but he's just not very organised. And I think that's a boy thing.
Yeah, go easy. Completely agree.
Yeah.
And yeah, I like just hearing the sacrifices that your mother has made there. And it sounds like your brothers and sisters receive the same support. Like, do you look back on her and think, like, what you did for me was amazing, and my brothers and sisters feel the same? Like, you are Superwoman.
Yeah. Like I said, I have no idea how she did it, and if I can be half the mum that she is, I'll be very happy. Yeah, because she tried to make it all even for all of us, and you know, 4 kids is a lot to try and make it even for.
Yeah. I've just got the vision now of her waking you up, taking you to training, and the 3 of your siblings in the back seat probably still asleep.
Yeah, they were. When they got old enough that they could stay in the house by themselves, she just left them there.
Yeah. Look, when you, and the reason I ask about parents, and I sort of transition to coaches now, because when you spend so much time training, especially as a really sort of young person, how important were your relationships with your coaches?
Oh, super important, because ultimately they're the people that you spend the most amount of time with.
Yeah.
And so you have to trust them completely. And they're not a friend, they're not a parent, they are a coach. And so you have to have that relationship where it's mutual trust as well, right?
Yeah.
And now we're friends because it's a little bit different. It's not a coach-athlete relationship anymore. But you have to have that mutual respect for each other.
Yeah. So tell me about them. You had two main ones over your career, didn't you? Nikolai and Martine?
Yeah. So I was with Martine for quite a few years, I'd say 14, 15 years, because I kind of transitioned up with her. Because the coach that she took over from went off and had some babies. And then so she transitioned up at the same time that I was ready to transition up.
So those little stages, your groups that you were talking about earlier, you sort of went through them with Martine?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it.
Right.
And so she kind of knew me inside and outside.
Yep.
And her coaching style was very creative, which was really good actually.
Yep.
So every 4 years we have kind of like a rule change in gymnastics.
Yeah.
And so she would call it like code hacking. So we have the code of points, which is our rules.
Yep.
So she would code hack and basically see how we could generate a routine to give us the best difficulty score. And she was really good at that. So that's what I mean. She was super creative.
Oh, that's fascinating.
So she mainly coached me on beam and floor.
Yep.
And then Nikolai, and this is, I don't know why, but it was always like there was male apparatus and there was female apparatus. So Nikolai mainly coached on bars, vault, and floor as well.
Yep.
So Martine did like the artistic stuff on floor and then Nikolai did the tumbling stuff on floor.
Yeah, wow.
And I was with him for probably about 10 years and obviously he's Russian, judging by his name. So he was a lot stricter and a lot more like logical compared to Martine. So it was nice to have the balance between the two.
Yeah. So, I mean, tell me about that, because in the disband of the Soviet Union, we had a lot of those coaches sort of head around the world, didn't we?
Yeah.
And it was Nikolai part of that sort of, part of that group that relocated?
Yeah. So he was in Siberia, I think. That's where he's from initially.
Yeah.
And I think he just didn't want to be in Russia anymore, and like a lot of people. And so I think it wasn't Liz, it was another, I want to say his name's Andre. Alana Slater would know a lot more because this was kind of her generation.
Yeah.
Someone who used to work at Waste then pulled him over and said, look, would you like to work here? And he goes, sure. So him and his wife Tatiana came out.
Yep.
And they started working at Waste. But with it, they also bring the Russian mentality, right?
Yeah. So
it's that strict, you have to do your numbers, you have to be like this, you have to, train this many hours, blah, blah, blah. And that's, the Russian mentality that was then brought around the rest of the world. So everyone had very similar training. And it was the Australian coaches or wherever those people went to, so say like America or the UK or whatever, it was those other coaches that said, okay, you need to take a step back and maybe it's a Western culture, we need to do it like this as well.
Yeah.
So it was quite nice actually having that balance.
Yeah, okay. Do you think there's still a place for, let's call it the Russian coaching mentality, whatever it was that Nikolai brought? Do you think there's still a place for that? Because the contemporary world is very much, individual based. I draw on my experience as a teacher, teaching used to be, right, whatever we say goes, you're going to learn this, we're going to do it this way.
Yeah.
But it's a lot different now.
Yeah.
Do you think there's still a place for that Russian mentality?
That's a hard question.
Yeah, loaded.
Yeah, it is a loaded question. I think the Russian mentality of being strict and being, okay, you need to do A, B, C, D, I think there's still a place for that because they obviously have been successful, so they know what to do. However, it needs to be adapted into the modern world, I think. So you can kind of take what they have with a pinch of salt and go, okay, well, this is the recipe, but let's enhance it and make it that a little bit better, Like that's our foundation, that's our baseline, and then we'll grow from that, And
it
does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah?
It kind of sounds like Martine and Nikolai complemented each other quite well.
Yeah, yeah.
Because you had that sort of nurturing from Martine and you had the hard taskmaster Nikolai.
But then they were really good as well because, you work so closely with them. If they were like, okay, you've got to do 5 of these, and then after 3, they're like, oh, no, you look really tired, like, that's enough, we're going to stop today. They were really good at doing that too. But then on the flip side, they were also really good at going, no, I know you're having a good day, come on, you can do the 5, not the 3.
You can do it.
And they could read us very well.
Fast forward to 2007. So you're 16 years old and you make your World Championships debut.
Yep.
and I suspect this is where at the very start of our conversation here that you were like, hang on, maybe I've got something here.
Yeah.
Then next year you were selected for the Beijing Olympic Games.
Yep.
At 17. Do you remember where you were when you found out that you were selected for Beijing?
Yeah. So we do 2 trials. So usually at our national championships of the Olympic year, that's when we do our first trial. So out of that, either 10 to 12 athletes then get selected to go to the second trials, which is in Canberra, probably about 8 weeks out from the Olympics. So in gymnastics, they like to push it back as long as they can before they have to select their team.
Okay.
And that's the AOC cutoff date, I think.
Yeah.
So we're all in Canberra, and so the training camp goes for a week or 2, and at the end of it, then there's a 2-day competition. Obviously, it's not just the 2 days. They watch how you train and stuff as well to then select you. And Beijing and London were very different in how they select you. So the process is still the same. You still have the first trial, then the second trial.
Yep.
In Beijing, we all sat in this auditorium, and it was quite. So you had 6 people in Beijing, 5 people in London to be selected.
Okay.
And the 6 people in Beijing, because I think there was only 10 people trialling at that time, it was quite obvious who it was going to be.
Right.
So we sat in an auditorium and someone just goes, these are the names, blah, blah, blah. And that was it. And we were like, oh my goodness. So you kind of, yeah. And then the 4 people were like, oh, okay, thanks. And knew that they were on a plane home. In London, it was, I reckon, even worse. So we were all in a room. Oh, this is more brutal. Wait.
Yeah.
We were all in a room, and basically they then called people in individually. And then once you got called in, they were like, okay, you've made it or you've not made it for these reasons. If you've made it, you went through that door. If you didn't make it, you went through that door. And you didn't know who was on the other side. So if you'd made it, you didn't even know who your teammates were. And if you didn't make it, you didn't know who didn't make it either. That was like awful. That one was awful.
Where was that?
So that was in AIS as well.
At the AIS?
Yeah. So there's all different rooms. So there's the auditorium and then the bronze, silver, gold room. I think this was in the silver room.
This is, oh my God. This is like.
It's like a game show.
It really is. And that's what I was going to say. This is like pop culture reference, but were you a Simpsons fan?
No.
Well, Mr. Burns has this trap door, and it feels like if you've not made it, it's just hit the button, down the trap door you go. See you later. What was the feeling like when you were told that, hey, you're going to be an Olympian?
It didn't really sink in until we were there.
Yeah.
I don't think.
Yeah.
Because it's one of those things you're like, okay, it's the next step. And like I said, in the Beijing one, you kind of had an inkling that, you were in the team because it was quite obvious the difference between the 6 and the 4. And it wasn't until I walked into, even when we were training in Beijing, it wasn't until you walked into the arena and you could see the crowd there and you could hear the crowd, you could see the apparatuses like all lit up and stuff, and you're just like, oh my God. And I remember Dad watching me and then telling me afterwards, and he was like, you just looked at your face and you just knew that at that moment you're an Olympian. And that was it. And that's probably one of the most surreal feelings ever.
Oh my, I can see it in your face now. Like you are beaming. That is amazing. So many things I need to ask you. Look, let's talk about 2010 actually, because I will have a chat about London in particular. But in 2010, you became Australia's first ever female world champion. Is this how does that sit with you?
I've had quite a few years now to kind of come to terms with it, and still I'm like, how did I do that?
Yeah, right.
You know?
Now, this was on the floor?
On the floor. Yeah. So the year previously I'd got silver.
Yep.
But it's completely different getting a medal versus being a world champion at a world championships, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And because I knew the lineup, so there's 8 girls that compete in the finals, and you only get one opportunity to qualify yourself into finals. So it's quite difficult to actually get in there.
Yep.
And the lineup for that was like a past Olympic champion, a past world champion, a current world champion. And I was just like, oh my goodness. So the lineup was massive. And you don't get a chance to touch the apparatus before you compete. You can only touch the back warm-up gym before you compete.
Yep.
And I was up 8th, and I don't like watching anybody else. So I went into the back gym and I warmed up.
8th out of how many?
8. So I was the last
You're going
competitor.
last.
Yeah.
Right.
The last
okay.
competitor on the last apparatus for the competition.
Oh, my goodness.
That was a 6 weeks campaign because it was off the back of the Commonwealth Games.
Oh, wow.
So after that, I was like, I'm just going to celebrate because I'm done, not because it was a good routine. So I was in the warm-up gym, warming up. The national coach was watching everybody else. And she came in, she was like, oh, the window of opportunity is open. And I was like, I don't want to know what that means. Don't tell me. Like, I don't like watching anybody else. Yeah. Anyway, went out there and I executed my routine and I came off and I was like, oh, a bit disappointed. It was just an average routine. I feel like I could have done better here. But that's the nature of gymnastics. Like, you're always striving for perfection.
What did she mean? I want to go back before we learn about this result. Yeah. What did she mean by the window of opportunity is open? So she meant that a couple of the other girls that were supposed to do really well didn't. So I think someone fell, someone stepped out of bounds, someone else did a mistake on something else. Did she tell you these particulars?
She could have, but I kind of tried to zone it out.
Yeah.
So that's why I don't actually know what's happened.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because, I didn't want to know, so I didn't know. Know, if I wanted to know, then I think it would have put a lot more pressure on me.
So you went out there, you did your thing, and you were like,
it's all right.
Yeah, right.
And then I saw the score and I knew what second was because I checked that before my score came up.
Yeah.
And then I actually read, because there's screens obviously all around the arena, and I read it wrong. I read it as like a 6 instead of an 8 or something like that. And I was like, oh, okay, second, that's not too bad. And then the crowd started getting even louder. And I was like, what? Then I had to look again. And then I think there's a photo and my face just drops and I was just like, oh my goodness. And it was kind of at that moment that it hit me and I was like, I've won.
Oh my God.
And it was the best feeling, like literally just standing up on the podium and you watch the Australian flag rise above the Russian and the Romanian, like all the dominant powerhouse gymnastics countries.
Yeah.
Knowing that you and like your team and everyone around you supporting you has caused that. So that's one of the best feelings as well.
That is insane. I love that. Especially knowing that you finished that going, maybe, nah. And then bang.
Yeah.
That is so good. Yeah. We've spoken a lot about gymnastics, but we've touched on what your parents mean to you and your siblings. And I want to get into a lot of things away from gymnastics. But the last one is London 2012.
Yep.
Now, you're an established athlete. You'd won this world championship. You knew you could do it. It ended 5th for you. But it was agonizingly close, wasn't it?
Yeah. Out of my entire gymnastics career, this is still the routine that I always think about.
Right.
And it's probably the only one that I'm disappointed in. And it's nothing that, well, obviously the routine I'm disappointed in, but I'm more disappointed in myself because I had pressure and expectations on myself going in, and I let that pressure and expectations take a hold of me. And because of that, then I didn't execute a routine that I was happy with. And I knew that at the time. I knew that there was these little like 1%ers everywhere in the routine that was just below average. So like I was talking about before, it was an average routine and ultimately I was happy with that. I'd done all the preparation and everything to put myself in the best possible position. And I was happy with the preparation, but it was just all the little 1%ers that just weren't there that was the difference between 5th and a medal. Wow. And I knew that as soon as I finished my routine, I was like, I'm not getting a medal. And that's why I'm disappointed with that. And I know that sounds silly. You're still 5th in Olympic Games, but it's just that one routine that still sticks with me.
It doesn't sound silly. I know from speaking with a lot of athletes that, if that's what they've set themselves to do and that's what they think they can do and they haven't, there's going to be disappointment.
Yeah.
And what were you doing to manage those expectations? Like I said, and like you just said, you knew you could do it. And so now there was that extra pressure. And I suppose the question is like hearing that you're disappointed in that, how did you manage it and what might you have been able to do differently?
I think I let the external influences. So the Olympic Games is very much about everything else apart from your competition. So I let all the external influences affect my competition.
And what are they?
So, for example, Sally Pearce and Anna Mears and myself were all competing on the same day.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's cool. And then I knew that they both won medals and then everyone was waiting on me.
Wow.
And I let, say, that get to me. For example, Laurie Lawrence, who's one of like the biggest cheerleaders that goes all the time. He was basically like, he gave us this speech and I was like, yeah, I'm going to do that. And then I got in my own head by like saying, yes, I'm going to do that, rather than actually just taking it back to basics and going, well, what am I going to do? All I need to do is a routine, you know? So I let the hype of it get in the way of me controlling actually what I could control, which ultimately was just my routine. And you try and do all your psychology and stuff beforehand, which is what I did. But you get 90 seconds on that arena and that's it. And if you can't handle it in the 90 seconds, then
I mean, it's a harsh way to look at it, Lauren.
Yeah.
I mean, like you said, you're still fifth in Olympic Games.
Yeah.
And, there's a whole lot that you've achieved, and I almost feel like it's the perfect time to ask it now. But there's a question I want to finish on. It's about success because, you would have been great to win a medal, but I just don't think that defines you, and I don't think you think that either.
No. And it's all these like little challenges and little milestones that you go through to get where you are, right?
Yeah. And I think the best part of this, and I will ask the question properly, but the best part of this is you're still smiling as you, as you reminisce, and that's really important. As is balance. We've spoken a lot about gymnastics, right? But gymnastics doesn't define you, right? There's a lot more to Lauren Mitchell than jumping up and down, doing flips and stuff. That's my expert take on what gymnastics is.
I can't do flips anymore. So
doing flips and stuff. What else did you have going on during this whole time? I understand you were studying and there was a whole lot to you. Yeah,
so I made the choice basically to study the entire time. I think there was only about 6 months off after London Olympics where I needed to reset and go, actually, what am I doing with my life? And that was quite good. I needed that reset. But we listened to a talk from Petria Thomas right before the 2008 Olympics, and she said the worst time in my swimming career was when I had nothing else to live for apart from swimming.
Wow.
So she wasn't studying, she wasn't working. All she was doing was swimming. So when she had a good day, it was great. When she had a bad day, she had nothing else to think about apart from why she had a bad day. If she was injured, she had nothing else to kind of fall back on. And I really took that on board. And basically I studied the entire time, or had something else going on the entire time that I was training. Because when you're in the gym, you're obviously in the gym. But when you're out of there, you have to really compartmentalize your life and be able to switch off. Otherwise, you're always on. Yes, your entire life kind of revolves around it, and you have to eat well and make sure you get enough sleep and, all those sorts of things, because your life does ultimately revolve around it. But you also have to compartmentalize and make sure that you've got that healthy balance. And, when you're training, you can train properly because you're not thinking about something else outside of your life. And then when you're outside, you can just leave the gymnastics in the gymnastics hall,
Yeah.
So, I was training and studying, working sometimes the entire time.
I think that's invaluable, particularly to young people who might be listening, because keeping a balance is so critical.
Yeah.
I think of so let's call you basically mid-20s when you retired at 25, yeah?
Yeah.
So, from your 18 through 25, I sort of think probably from my experience, my friend's experience, what that might look like. And it's probably, relationships, beginning careers, sort of heading out with friends, traveling, drinking, eating whatever you want.
Yeah.
All these things that we think is, and I say this in inverted commas, normal.
Yeah.
But that certainly wasn't your life.
No.
Did you ever want that?
I wanted to be an elite athlete more.
Yeah.
And someone once said, it's not about the sacrifices you make, it's about the choices that you make. So you don't see them as sacrifices, you see them as choices. It was my choice to be an elite athlete and to train every single day. If that's what I didn't want anymore, then I could then go out and do what I wanted.
Yeah.
But you could never see it as a sacrifice because that's a negative connotation, right? So you have to see it as a choice that you make. So it was my choice to only go out on a Saturday night because we had the Sundays off.
That is such a better way to put it. I think even in my introduction, I spoke about sacrifice, but I think shaping it as choice is so great.
Yeah, it's the same thing,
but
it's a different way of mentally perceiving it, right? And if I didn't want to do it anymore, then I didn't want to do it anymore,
And I think life is about the narrative we tell, right? So shaping it as a choice rather than a sacrifice is really cool.
Yeah.
You mentioned there, you said it's a choice. If I didn't want to do it anymore, I wouldn't.
Mm.
Did you ever, nearly reach that point, obviously before retirement?
I reached it a couple of times. It was quite hard, growing up in the gym, being a teenager as well.
Yeah.
You still go through those same teenage emotions and things and think that you're better than what you are. And it was at that point I was like, no, I've done everything I need to do. So say, for example, in 2019, I got the 2 medals, one on beam, one on floor, both silver. And I was like, no, I'm happy with that. No one else has got a silver medal before. And it was actually Liz Chekovich. She sat me down. She's like, you need to stop this. You need to pull yourself out. You need to get back on track because you're not going to be successful again, basically, in a nutshell.
That sounds like Liz.
Yeah. Which, ultimately put some fire up my butt. And then that's because I hadn't been to a Commonwealth Games. So I wanted to go to all 3 of them. So Olympics, World Championships and Commonwealth Games. And that was in 2010. So when she said, you need to get yourself together, basically, I was like, all right, I'll go to the Commonwealth Games then. And then obviously it was quite successful, that Commonwealth Games, and then the World Championships straight after.
4 gold medals?
Yeah.
Just a lazy 4.
Just a lazy 4. And the silver medal was on floor, actually. So
there you go.
Ironically, yeah.
Oh, how about that?
Yeah.
So, look, the time came for retirement at 25. Preceding that, you did your ACL and your PCL at the same time, which sounds like a bundle of fun.
I'm talented.
What was that injury time like?
That was probably one of the worst ones in my career. And I know it sounds so cliche because it was kind of towards the end of my career. But the ACL, you know that you need surgery, right?
Yeah.
So I went to the doctors and he was like, oh, look, we don't have to operate if you want to walk in straight lines for the rest of your life. And I was like, no, I want to be able to turn, please.
Yeah.
So the older you are, the less that you actually need your ACL. Obviously, I'm still quite young, so I wanted to get it fixed. And it was probably nearly exactly 12 months out from the Rio Olympics. So there was a couple of different options for me to get the ACL fixed. So the footballers have been doing something called like a LARS implantation. And that was like the LARS is basically like a plastic drink bottle type substance that they just stick in there.
Yep.
But it's not got a very long lifespan, so about 3 months. As soon as you kind of start running again, it's got no give, so it re-ruptures. So that was kind of never an option.
Right.
You could do a normal graft, which, normal everyday people kind of do, but that takes 12 months to recover. Because with the ACL, it doesn't have a good blood supply. You have to wait for your body to kind of produce that blood supply to then be able to start training. Even though your knee feels good, you're not able to. Obviously, if I wanted to retire at that point, that would then be my option because the longevity of that is quite long.
Okay.
That will last forever, basically. The option that I went for was a augmentation between the 2.
Uh-huh.
So I had the LARS, and then basically they took the gracilis, which is one of your adductor hammy muscles.
Yeah.
And then they plait that and then they put that in. So the LARS acts like an internal splint while you get your blood supply back and then you can start healing. So it kind of, instead of the 12 months, it takes maybe the 9 months, but 6 months you can then start training again.
Yep.
So I was basically 6 months out from the Olympics, still not even being able to do a cartwheel, which is pretty important in gymnastics.
Yeah, from what I know.
Yeah. So I was still, in that time, Australia unfortunately didn't qualify a team. They could only send one person to the Olympics. So I still trialled to try and be that one person, and I was still successful. I still won beam at the national championships, which, 9 months after doing an ACL I was pretty proud of.
Yeah, so you should be.
Yeah, but unfortunately they chose someone else who hasn't just come off rehab, which, is fair enough.
Yeah.
They're well inclined to.
And then came the decision not long after. So you were 25 years old. You've decided that I've given everything I can, I assume. What was that decision like?
So I was selected to go to a World Cup competition in Portugal. And basically I asked Gymnastics Australia, look, can you book my return flight a month after, not straight after the competition? And I'm going to travel around Europe, and they agreed to it. So I did, a month of traveling around Europe, just kind of getting my thoughts together and seeing what I wanted to do. And ultimately I decided, look, I'm not physically or mentally prepared to push myself to 100% every single day.
Yeah.
And I kind of had a string of injuries in that last 12 months or 18 months, I guess. Coming back, and I was like, well, that's my body's way of saying it's not willing to be pushed 100% of the way either.
Yep.
And when you're an elite athlete and you're not willing to give it that 100%, you're never going to be successful. And because I wasn't willing to do it, I was like, I've had enough.
So you step away from Lauren Mitchell, the gymnast.
Yeah.
Were you scared of the next chapter?
Yeah. I think anyone who is an elite athlete who steps away is scared because it's been your life for 18 years, right? You don't know who you are without it.
Yeah.
Yes, you don't identify being that person, but it's still a huge part of what you did. And that first couple of months afterwards, so when I was training and say, for example, you were sick and you didn't go into training, you felt super guilty for not turning up. So I was waking up in the morning, still nearly every morning to go to the gym because if I didn't, I felt super guilty. And it took my mum, my sister to sit me down and go, because I lived with my sister at the time, you don't have to do this anymore. You don't have to go to the gym every day. You can have a day off. And it took me a decent amount of time, I would say probably a year, maybe even more, for me to go, it's okay that I don't go to the gym and not get that guilty feeling anymore. Because it's just that elite athlete mentality.
Yeah.
What's next?
I can't miss a session. I can't do this, I can't do that.
Yeah. And then that feeling of I'm not going to be fit, you know? And that's really hard.
Did it shift from maybe like you're waking up going, I need to do this. I have to do this, have, need to, I want to do, like I want to do things differently.
Yeah, it definitely made that shift between I need to I want. And then it was that I want to feel stronger. And so one of my friends, he started doing CrossFit and I used to train with him back in the day.
Yeah.
And he said, come down, have a look at this, what we do, and see if it's something that you like. And CrossFit's basically a combination between gymnastics, weightlifting, and endurance.
Yep.
So I went there. Obviously, my gymnastics is very good.
Can't understand why.
My weightlifting is not very good. So I went down there and watched their competition. And I was like, oh, like this is something that I can get around.
Yeah.
And it kind of gave me back that drive again to go, okay, this is what I want to do now. I want to get stronger in this area. I want to do this, do that. And I actually noticed my body starting to change, like getting different type of muscles and things like that. So it gave me that motivation, that drive again. But what I think really helped is because they were group classes, you didn't see the same people every day. You did, but it wasn't every single person there every single day. And that really helped me go, it's actually okay to have a day off. And then not have that guilty feeling.
Yep.
So that was probably nearly 18 months after I retired, I think.
And I imagine there's some part of you that gravitated towards like a community of people.
Yeah.
Because gymnastics, well, it's not always individual. Like sometimes there are those team events, but it is an individual skill, but you train in a group, right?
Yeah, and you grow up with the girls that you train with.
Yeah.
You've been there since you were 6 and you all grow up together.
How important for you is, and this is not Lauren Mitchell, the gymnast, like this is Lauren, the person. How important is that sense of belonging?
Oh, it's super important. And that's why I don't shop and change gyms. Like I found my CrossFit gym and that's where I go to because they're your people now, you know, and you see them every day. And what's quite nice is that you see them outside the gym as well, where I think a lot of gyms, like say a Revo or a Snap Fitness or something, you just go, you do your work and then you leave again.
Yeah.
But it's nice actually having the classes and having that sense of community, sense of belonging and that sense of competitiveness as well, which I think helps.
I feel there's this feeling within you that transcends gymnastics. When you were talking about being on the podium, looking at the Australian flag above the Russian and the Romanian, you said, this people have got me here. Like it's not just me.
Oh, I couldn't do it by myself though, right? Like I don't have the gymnastics knowledge to be able to do that by myself. You couldn't do it without those people surrounding you and then your teammates as well to get you to that point. So you know how I said before you needed a team to qualify for the Olympics. Like your team had to qualify a spot for the World Championships. Without the other 5 people on the team, you're never going to get there, you know? And that was a big problem in the male gymnastics. They only had one person that they could send every single time. Right. So without those people there, you would never get to where you are. I'm not a psychologist. So I don't know what I'm doing with that. So, you know, you had someone helping you with that. Yeah. I'm not a physiologist. You had someone doing your skin folds all the time. I'm not a physiotherapist, you know, so you had all those people helping you get to that point. And without them, you wouldn't. So it's definitely a team effort.
That is awesome. I've wanted to ask you this for a while, this whole conversation. When did you realise that you were like a role model for young girls, probably not even in Australia, like all around the world?
Probably not for a while, actually. It probably wasn't until after maybe London Olympics, which is when Gymnastics Australia started, I guess, the programs for the young girls to come in and like say train with us or watch us and get us to sign stuff for them after nationals and things like that. And only recently the AOC contacted me to do a photo shoot with Kiana Elliott, who's now a weightlifter, who used to be a gymnast, who I didn't realise that we'd actually met before at the AIS. And she was like, oh, you were my idol and this and that. I was like, thank you.
How cool is that?
Yeah, and it was actually really nice meeting her on the flip side because she's now an Olympian as well and she was trialling for her second Olympics.
Yeah.
Very close to actually making it. So it's quite nice to see like, because you don't see it, right? You just go and you do your job and you're happy with your thing, but then you don't see all these young people looking up to you. Yep. Even someone at work said, oh, their sister had posters of you on their wall. And I was like, oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. So, yeah.
Nice to have that reflection.
Yeah.
I think of things like injury or, you're not finishing where you'd hoped, like in London, dragging yourself out of bed when you didn't want to. Where did you find the strength to practice resilience? Like what was going on in your mind during your hardest challenges?
Probably the ACL was definitely the hardest.
Yeah.
That was especially when I first did it and I got a phone call and they're like, look, you've done your ACL, blah, blah, blah. That was kind of when I was at my lowest and definitely like literally sitting on the couch doing nothing all day, sleeping. And I knew that and that took a lot to pull me out of that.
Not a life you're used to.
No. But say other injuries. So say you do like an ankle injury.
Yeah.
You can always do upper body stuff. So in gymnastics, we're quite lucky that if you've got one bit injured, you can always come into the gym and you can find something to do, be it upper body, be it endurance, be it, something else.
Yeah.
So for example, I had a subluxing shoulder. So it's where the shoulder joint doesn't really sit properly in the socket all throughout.
Been there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also from my international gymnastics career. Yeah.
Naturally. So that was like in the lead up to London and stuff. And you're like, well, I either do something about it now or suck it up and compete at the Olympics again, So I think it's just one of those elite athlete mentality things that you're like, okay, well, I have to just grit my teeth and I just got to do it because if this is what I really want, then I have to do it. And I think we get taught resilience from such a young age because, you start when you're 6, right? And if you get injured when you're 7, then you find something else to do. Yeah. And there was always something to do.
Oh, wow. That is, it's amazing. And I think to hear the resilience of an elite athlete, like to push through it, that's so, it's cool. It is really cool, but it feels daunting. Yeah.
It's about controlling what you can control, right? Obviously, particularly with the ACL, you can't control the timeline. The timeline's the timeline. With other injuries, you can you have your rehab and you can kind of try and speed up the process. But the ACL, you have to wait for your blood supply to come back. Yeah. And there's nothing you can do about that. Yeah. So it's about controlling what you can control. And literally some things were just going into the gym and doing a one-legged squat. Yeah. That was it,
How's life been in the past, 7 years since retirement?
Good.
Yeah. What are you up to?
So I'm now a qualified radiographer or a medical imaging technologist, which is the proper degree, but no one knows what that is.
Fancy. Yep.
So I work now at Royal Perth, which is the state, we have obviously the state trauma unit there.
Yeah.
So we get all the major traumas that come in, which is pretty intense. And to be honest, when I first retired and I first started seeing, people's life affected in split seconds, that had a really good effect on me in the fact that you're like, okay, well, sport, right? And I had an amazing career and stuff like that. But your entire life can change in an instant.
Yeah.
Literally from a car accident, from, a car going onto the wrong side of the road or like falling down the stairs, like anything like that.
Sometimes not even your fault.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so it was a really good, put your life into perspective really well. Because, obviously struggling, retiring from an elite sport, but then to go into an emergency department where people's normal lives just change overnight and they have to be super resilient to change with it. It's quite humbling, I think.
Yeah.
So I predominantly work in MRI now, actually. Yeah.
This would be a bit of a different question if I was asking a footballer in Western Australia or perhaps a cricketer, but do people you work with or even patients, do they recognise you?
The people I work with, knew, obviously,
Yeah.
because when I did prac there at Royal Perth, and that was just after I retired.
Okay. Yeah.
So people knew that then.
Yeah.
But I get a lot of people going, I know you from somewhere. And they're like, where did you go to school? What did you do? And I was like, I think I know exactly where you know you're from. But then I'm not one of those people to be like, oh, yes, I'm a gymnast.
No, you don't strike me as that.
Yeah.
I'll finish all these discussions, Lauren, with two questions. And they are questions that I hope make a difference to people's lives, especially young people who might be listening. Now, I suck at pronouncing this name, but I heard last year, so his name's Giannis Antetokounmpo,
Okay.
I think. He plays basketball.
Okay.
He had a response to a journalist. He basically was asked if his team's season was a failure because they were knocked out of the finals in the first round. He was very passionate when he answered. You should have a listen. It's really cool. But the gist was that there are more goals and performance indicators than winning a championship. That's what he was getting at. And he cited Michael Jordan's 6 championships in 15 years. And he was like, so are the other 9 years failures.
Yeah.
So my first question to you, what does success mean to you and what does it look like?
I guess it comes back down to the controlling what you can control and the 1%ers and putting yourself in the best possible position to be successful. We're a sport where it's not the fastest, it's not the highest, it's not the strongest, it's what someone else thinks about you. So it's a subjective sport. So all you can do is put yourself in that best possible position to be successful. If the judges then decide that you're the most successful on the day, then you've been successful in everyone else's eyes. But if I've put out a routine that I'm happy with and that I knew that I had executed to my fullest, then I'm happy with that, you know. And I controlled every single situation to put myself in that best possible position. Yeah. And that is success for me.
That's cool. And I know I'm kind of cheating because I said there's only 2 questions left, but an offshoot of that, what's success look like for Lauren now that she's not a gymnast?
Getting a steady paycheck? No.
Well, like it's kind of necessary, isn't it?
Yeah. But, so it's just different goals, right? And I guess like normal everyday goals, but still like I love going to the gym. So I have obviously all my little goals within that. I know I'm never going to be as strong as some of the girls in there. But like I've snatched 60 kilos and clean and jerked 80 kilos. And I like when I first started CrossFit, did not think that was going to be anything possible. Yeah. So, you know, all those kind of little goals, you know, when I met someone and now who is now my husband, you know, like that was a little goal as well. You know, you want to get married, end up having a family. So then that's success too. But again, like same thing, controlling what you can control. Like MRI was super important to me to go into in my career, and I got that within the first 18 months and that was successful. And now I'm one of the seniors at work as well. So all like just different types of goals. Yeah.
That's cool. And finally, as she sits here now at the age of 32, what does Lauren Mitchell say to a young person and an aspiring Olympian? What do you say to them?
I think just follow your dreams, really. And again, that sounds so cliche. I don't think I dreamed big enough. When I was younger, I was like, oh, all I want to do is go to Commonwealth Games. And it took other people's success and then my own success to actually open my eyes. But why can't you do it, you know? And do all those little 1%ers and put yourself in the best possible position for yourself to either be on the team or to be the best person possible and, control all the factors that you can control.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't even know what does it justice to sum up this discussion, but I've absolutely loved it because we've learned, and this is the most important thing for me, is that there's so much more to you than gymnastics, but the things you learned through your time as a gymnast, they transcend that and they're now clear here as somebody who's been out of the sport for 7 years. So I think everybody listening will gain so much from hearing what you've said. I thank you, but on behalf of everybody, thank you for having a chat because being an Olympian is much more than being an Olympian. There's a person behind the story, and thank you so much for sharing it with us today.
Oh, thanks for inviting me. It was fun.
Fantastic. There she is, Lauren Mitchell. As I went through, it's a seriously impressive CV, but more importantly, a darn good person.